fisherman's Post. More fish, more often.
Hello and welcome again to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. I'm Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community of North Carolina since 2003, bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and now in this latest chapter, bringing you the Saltwater Podcast Series. And in this series, we talk to our friends, our captain and guide friends from up and down the North Carolina coast, and ask them to share their insights on how to catch more fish more often. But I believe our true goal is more than just more fish. I believe our true goal is just to give you confidence, to give you motivation to go out and spend more time on the water with more of your friends and family. And so I'm joined, as I am every episode, with Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative.
How's it going, Gary?
It's going good.
Good to see you, man.
Let me tell you what we have today.
All right, I'm excited.
We're going to be talking to Mike Donovan, and we're going to talk to him about pier kingfishing. But here's the thing. He's not an expert.
That's awesome.
I know, right?
Somebody finally like me. I'm excited.
But he has a unique perspective because he just finished he's done quite a bit of pier fishing. He's just finished his first season of kingfishing from the pier.
All right.
And so that's why I wanted to bring him in. I figure, there might be other people out there that want to get started. And instead of hearing from a 30-year vet, let's hear from a guy that just went through the process of acclimating himself to the pier king culture.
That's good, man. I like the diversity, Gary.
I do too.
I like it.
Because those experts,
I'm sick of those experts.
They just know everything.
They catch so many fish all that time on the water.
They're the worst.
Makes me sick.
The worst. So we're going to talk about gear. We're going to talk about terminal tackle. We're going to talk about setting up the anchor rod, setting up the fighting rod, hookups and landings. So we got a lot to cover just because he's in his first season, finishing up his first, I'll say, successful season. We got a lot to cover.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell people how they can watch, how to listen. If you are watching, you know how to watch. If you listen, it's on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes. And make sure you subscribe to those channels and like and share them. And then also, if you want to watch, go to YouTube, our YouTube channel, look up Fisherman's Post, and be sure to subscribe on there as well. That way you get the little notification, hit that little bell, do all those fun bells and whistles. So, yeah, Gary, that's how you do it. Are you subscribed to our channel?
I am subscribed to our YouTube channel.
I own the channel. What are you talking about?
I did subscribe to our own YouTube channel. I think I saw like $7.99. I'm like, cool, I could be an even 800 or whatever it was.
Okay.
I forget what the number was.
I think we're way past that now.
Okay, good.
Or maybe not way, but we're past it. We want to try to get to 900 now. So if you're listening to this, I don't even care if you like fishing. Just go over there and do it.
Right.
And it wouldn't be possible without our awesome sponsors, Marine Warehouse Center, man. Really love those guys. They're so supportive of the show and just making it possible. So everything you see here is made possible
by Marine Warehouse Center. And
I'm going to play a little ditty. I don't know why I was going to say it like they're going to play a song or something. I'm going to play a commercial from them. We'll be right back. All right.
This is Preston with Marine Warehouse Center. We're your headquarters for Carolina Skiff, Sea Chaser, Prepare Marine, and Sailfish Boat. If you're looking for tons of features and value without compromise, come check out our inventory in person or check us out online.
All right, man. Good looking stuff there.
Great guys, sales, service, parts, great guys. I've befriended, if you watch the podcast, then I've befriended Terrell lately, been hanging out with him.
Oh yeah, you guys are big buds now.
Drinks, snacks, he tells me a joke.
Jokes.
And I have one for
today. Is that like a weekly meetup?
I actually might have to cool the relationship. I think Terrell's trying to take it to the next level. I might have to cool him down a little bit. But yes, this past week, Terrell made me pancakes. He poured a couple apple ciders, and he told me this joke.
Where's my sound effects? Hold on.
I don't want sound effects. Yeah, he told me that. This is Terrell's joke, right? This isn't me. A little fish walks into a bar. The bartender asks the fish, "What can I get you?" The little fish replies, gasping, "Water. I need water."
Water. I thought you were going to say a bubbly.
And that's when I said, "Terrell, I think I got to go."
Terrell.
I said, "Wait, I think my wife's calling me. I got to go." These are great pancakes, though.
Oh man. Well, Terrell, I like that joke if you're listening. I mean, I know Gary, he's a hard crowd, but I liked it. It's good.
Show me a fish photo.
Here we go with the fish photo. This is Graylin Baker of Oak Island with a 41-pound king mackerel caught on a short rigger pulling a pink skirt with a live pogie. He was fishing 1 mile off of Cherry Grove Pier. Good looking fish. I couldn't even get it all the way in our little picture frame there, Gary, because it's a
big fish.
It's a 41-pound fish.
It's a big king.
So,
And while it wasn't caught from the pier, it was caught close to the pier.
yeah.
So it seemed to be an appropriate fish photo for this episode.
Probably swims next to the pier if I had to imagine. So there's a shot that somebody could have pulled that one up.
Yeah.
Good. I knew that's what you're going for.
Yeah. Hey, keep in mind, at the end of the episode, at the end of the podcast, I come back to you for Billy's best takeaway.
I'm going to be ready.
All right.
I got it.
All right. All right, so let's bring up our guest. Our guest today is Mike Donovan. Mike Donovan is a frequent of Surf City Pier on Topsail Island, Surf City Pier right in Surf City. And again, what we're doing with Mike is we're going to talk about pier kingfishing. We're calling it a beginner's first season. Plenty of experience on the pier. Just finished your first season, a successful season of king mackerel fishing from the pier. Mike, welcome to the podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary.
So we're going to talk about gear. We're going to talk about terminal tackle, anchor rod, fighting rod, hookups, and landings. And before we get to that, though, as is tradition on the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast series, I've got 2 questions for you. The first question, and I've almost answered this for you already. Why should we listen to what you have to say about beginning to fish for kings from the pier?
Well, I've been actually fishing on Surf City Pier for 6 years now. A good friend of mine, my mentor for kingfishing, been fishing for kings for a number of years. Took me under his wing. Great fisherman, taught me everything he knows about kingfishing, and convinced me. I've spent so much time on Surf City Pier, I might as well just put a king rig out there when I'm out there fishing, and it all made sense to me. So that's how I got started.
Well, right on. All right. Second question. And as is tradition on the podcast series, a non-fishing question. I believe you're a retired Army, so you've done some traveling, so you probably have a good shot at this one. I pulled this from the fact that we're talking about Surf City Pier in Surf City, so this is questions based on that material. There are 2 California towns that claim to be, in quotation marks, Surf City or Surf City, USA. Can you name either of them?
No. No idea.
I didn't know either until I Googled, because we're East Coast locked. It would be Huntington Beach or Santa Cruz. I guess they're fighting it out on the West Coast for who is the official Surf City USA. I think surfing started in Huntington Beach. Hawaiians. I'm not sure. I'm gonna mess up if I try to go on more. Let's go back to the topic. Let's start the podcast because I know people want to get right into the material, and we already take long to do that. So let's talk about it. You're wanting to fish from the pier. You're kingfish from the pier. Of course, that takes special gear. What do we need? What is it? How do we intro into this fishery without spending a ridiculous amount of money?
Okay, that's a good question. That's one I would like to just say quickly that if you're thinking about getting into kingfishing, you don't get crazy about it, especially in your first year. It would be even the best scenario would be have someone that has a setup, an extra one that you can use, that you can just take out and get the fundamentals down with that one and learn what you like the best, because a lot of people go crazy. I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars on a setup with the reels and the fighting rod and the anchor rod and all those things. It's not necessary. So again, the best scenario is find someone that has an extra setup that you can try out, and that's exactly what I did. I used my partner's stuff for a few months and got to know the way to kingfish, and then started to buy a few things little by little. So that's my best advice when you're first starting out. Don't go crazy. Watch out there if you're on the pier. Identify somebody that you think is a good pier king fisherman, and maybe start up a relationship with that guy or gal, and maybe they can show you everything you need to know.
What's pretty standard when it comes to anchor rods? Like, what are we looking for out of an anchor rod, or what's a pretty general anchor rod buy? If we don't have friends to advise us.
Okay, an anchor rod, anywhere from a 10-foot to a 12-foot rod. They're kind of similar to a surf rod. They've got some flexibility. The reel itself, you can go two ways. You can go with a spinning reel or a bait cast reel. Some of the vets out there use the spin cast. They just like the way they can cast that better. They don't have to hold their finger on the line necessarily when they're casting it out. So those are the two different types of reels they use for the anchor rod. Like I said, a 10 or 12, even a 15 would work. You just want to get a little, you want it to be kind of stiff so it holds the anchor in when you're once you got it out there and seated in the bottom of the ocean.
Size reel and spooled with what?
Size reel, you want a pretty good reel that you can tighten down fairly well. I can actually show you a reel I have here, but the mono is what we use on it. It's just a 25-pound mono that's spooled up, and that's pretty much it. Just a little surf type reel to kind of give you a comparison would work. Something you use for surf fishing.
Man, I think your advice about not going all in and then trying a couple of rods if at all possible is sage advice, because you don't know what you like until you're working with it. Do you remember your process, like what it was about one anchor rod you didn't like and then why you moved to another? And again, everyone's experience is going to be different, so someone else wouldn't have that, but I'd love to have any kind of insight into how your perspective changed.
Well, my perspective on that is I went with a 12-foot. After using the 12-foot, it pretty much just followed suit. The 12-foot gets your rod up higher off the pier ledge, so you can get a better angle with your line that's going down to your anchor. And you throw your anchor out, probably 75 yards. If you got a good arm, you get it out there. So the higher you can get that rod, the better angle you got. Therefore, when you put your bait down on that line, you got more area to work with. You can bring it in closer. You can take it out farther, generally out farther. So that works well to have, that 12-foot rod. Also, it gives you a little bit more zing when you throw it out. It gives you that more flexibility in the rod to get that little flick you need to get that 8-ounce anchor out there.
Okay, now let's have the same conversation with the fighting rod.
Okay, the fighting rod is there's a whole, you can spend thousands of dollars on a fighting rod. The base price on one, you're in the $100 range or $130 range. That's a complete rod and reel setup. The fighting rod's about 6 foot long. Everybody's got their own, what they feel comfortable with. I used a Penn Squall. You could use that one for a beginner for sure. They come in different size capacities for line. I have a 50 Squall 50 that puts 400 yards on of mono. That's the minimum you want to put on a reel, because if you get a big king on, he's going to take all of that and probably more if he's really running. So a lot of guys will go with a little bigger reel, like one that'll hold 600 yards. That's probably where you want to kind of be, but not necessary. Depends on who you talk to.
All right, so fighting rod, anchor rod, and then I guess we go to terminal tackle before we go to sort of technique, right? Like, talk to me a little bit about terminal tackle.
Okay, so as I was, let me get the thing here. This is just the anchor rod that you use, that you set out with your 25-pound mono off your anchor rod. That's, once you set it out, you set it in, get it dug into the sand, and that's what you need to get started at least with getting your anchor out. And then once you get your anchor line out, you've got that set, then you bring your fighting rod into the game and you use a quick release type setup. You can buy these in your local bait and tackle store. You can buy them even in the pier shop. It's something like this. See if I can get a better.
Yeah, we're not
picture.
seeing it. There we go. Pull it back to you more.
There we go.
There
Yeah,
we
that's
go.
good.
All right. So this basically is an egg sinker, a 5-ounce egg sinker. It's got 2 beads on each end, and you take a wire, put it up through it. These are homemade, but this is what I learned to use, and then a snap hook on the bottom. So this is actually the way it would set up on your on your line. You would snap this to your line that's going down to the water, and this is what you hook your fighting rod line into. So this is hooked to your fighting rod, and once the fish gets on, it's a quick release. So this is got some tension in it right here, and it pulls out, and then it releases the line to the fighting rod, and you're clear of the anchor line at that point. So that's what you would use to do your initial setup.
So walk me through what I was following everything except for the quick release and how that line is attached to how my fighting rod line is attached to that quick release. I understand the snap swivel goes over the line going to the anchor rod, but the bottom part I missed it.
Okay, this part here.
Yeah.
Okay, that part. I'm getting all screwed up here. That part goes into the. I'll show you real quick. This is going to be tied on. You got this here, and that's actually tied to your fighting rod. So
Okay.
You've got that, and that's tied on to your main line on
Okay.
the fighting rod. Then you stick your quick release in that.
Okay.
And so when your main line is on this part right here, so then when the fish gets on, it pulls that, and you're free to fight the fish from the anchor line. It breaks away from the anchor line, basically.
All right, I follow. Thank you for clarifying that.
A little confusing.
Now tell me about what's on the hook, or what's on the true terminal tackle.
Okay, so you can buy these again at the at your bait shop, or you can make them. I have been. You can use different type of line. You use a hard wire line like this. You can use a braided wire, but I was taught to use this type of wire. That wire is anywhere from 3 to 6 feet in length, and I'll show you what that looks like. I can find where I put it. So this is your line. Again, this is the part that I was talking about that goes on
Gotcha.
your fight. Okay, so this is attached to your fighting rod, and then you got this is a 5-6 foot leader that you put your hooks on. Let's see, get this untangled here.
Most of the baits you guys send out from the pier, are they naked baits? Are they skirted baits?
They're usually, as far as live bait, or we don't.
Like if you have a bluefish on, if you have a live pogie, is there any kind of skirt on the rig itself, or is it just plain hook, plain wire? That's how you like to fish from the pier.
Plain hook, plain wire.
Okay.
Yep. So the hooks that we have are a 4 times treble hook. just gives you extra strength and durability, because a lot of times the hook will come out, the king will go after the bait, but it doesn't always end up in his mouth, and you end up with these other hooks in his body. And we've got plenty of fish in a lot of times with the hook, 3 or 4 hooks in them like this. You have the hook that goes in the front of the fish, the bait fish, and the hook that goes in the back, and then you have a stinger one, and that one can go into the bottom of the fish. If it's a small fish, you don't even need to put the stinger in the fish. It can just drag loose out there in the water. So you got another opportunity to get a hook into the fish.
So you like 3 hooks. You like a hook in the front of the fish, a hook in the back of the fish, and then just a stinger hook that probably is just dangling.
Right, and that stinger hook can be a treble hook or it can be a single hook. If you buy them in the store, it's generally made up with a single hook for the stinger.
And then, so what is the favorite bait of choice for pier king fishing?
For Surf City Pier, I would have to say that's the bluefish. Bluefish have been come hard to come by, especially since they've made it only 3 per fisherman. We had a hard time catching bluefish this year a lot of times, so we resorted to actually pinfish, a fairly large pinfish. Actually, my first king was caught on a pinfish. So bluefish, pinfish, or any type of bait fish, if it's really a bad day for getting bait fish, you can use pretty much any type of a bait fish out there, as long as it's got something that's going to live for a period of time out there, because you don't want to keep changing out your bait continuously. I mean, if you put a bluefish out there, it could last all day long and without having to change it out.
And if you could pick the size of your bluefish, it would be a bluefish how long?
Well, we call them candy bars. They're probably 12 inches long. Sometimes the guys go with the bigger ones. They think bigger bait, bigger fish, that could be, but that's generally the size, is 8 to 12 inches long is kind of what we go with.
And are you typically, is the typical pier angler just catching their bluefish, plugging from the pier? Is that it? You're searching for your bait and then putting your bait on your king rod?
Right. So the day starts early. I mean, you got to get out there before sunrise usually to get your bait. It's not an absolute. You can use a sabiki rig or a diamond jig to, early in the morning to get your bait. Putting a plug out there in dark isn't going to do you much good. So a diamond jig or a sabiki rig, sometimes you tip it with some shrimp or to get the smell down there for them. But we usually will catch those right alongside the pier, right below the pier. You'll catch your bait fish. So yeah, getting out there early is important. And do you have a bait bucket that you put over the side of the pier, tie it on? It's usually a 5-gallon bucket with holes in it, and that's how you keep your bait fish alive throughout the day.
And is everyone pretty much exclusive? Like, am I out there and I have my bait bucket and you have your bait bucket and the guy next to you has his bait bucket, or how much community happens when it comes to bait?
If you're fishing with someone, you can share your buckets, but because there's only so much room on the pier for putting a bunch of buckets down, so generally, people do share. If I got a friend with me, I'll share the bucket with him. Because like I said, there's only so much room when we don't want to take up, a good portion of the pier with bait buckets, because you can't fish that side of the pier with bait buckets hanging down from the side with ropes on them, because it'll be a big tangled mess.
So maybe this is a time, and this isn't in our list of topics, but this is certainly on my mind when I think about, entering into the pier kingfishing world. So there's certainly cultures at the pier, there's communities at the pier, and yeah, man, people in general are nice. And so if I am a brand new person, I want to get started on king mackerel fishing, what can I expect from the guys and gals? I'm using guys gender neutral. What can I expect from the people at the end of the pier, man? How do I walk out there, introduce myself, and get them more on my side rather than, oh no, we've got a newbie that we've got to keep an eye on?
That's a good question. It depends. I mean, your biggest thing is, this is what happened with me. I went out there and fished for mackerel, Spanish mackerel, for many years, and I just watched and observed. You want to get on a good side of a kingfisherman, give him a couple blues that you caught, and he'll be your friend forever, basically. But generally speaking, anybody out there is more than happy and eager to share the information that they know about kingfishing. They'll take you in if you come out there and you can't throw out an anchor rod or whatever. They'll throw the anchor rod out for you. The community really comes in after you start kingfishing, where when you get a king on, everybody has to work together because you've got anywhere from 3 rigs to 13 king rigs on the end of the pier, and it takes a lot of coordination to get those rods out of the way when an individual is trying to fight a king mackerel at the end of the pier. You've got to move rods and anchor rods, and it can get kind of hectic out there. But what I found, my personal experience, is that that kingfish before I started, they enjoy sharing their knowledge, how they tie up their rigs, how they fish it, what kind of reel they use. They'll sit down with you and help you do anything you need to do.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I've had nothing but positive experiences on the pier. I try to keep in mind, maybe I have an easier route because of the Fisherman's Post connection, but it does seem just like a quality group of people no matter what pier I'm on. And I figured they were ambassadors, but it just seemed like a question to ask out loud. Again, if someone's thinking about getting started, then that peer culture can be a little intimidating, like going out there for the first time and trying to find your spot and, the do's and the don'ts. And, maybe, I think we're going to finish with, I'm going to ask you some do's and some don'ts. But in talking about community, you brought up the hookup. So here's where we're going to go, man. We've got the anchor rod out there and it's set. And we've got our live bluefish, our live, pinfish. We've got our live bait out there. And let's say, not the person next to me, but let's say somehow we've already got our hookup. And I know it's a fine-tuned machine when anyone gets a hook out of the end. Tell me what happens, man, so I have a better idea of what to expect when that hookup hopefully comes.
Okay, so when you have your fighting rod, fighting rods have a clicker on them, which alerts everybody that's out there that there's a fish on. It starts going off, that clicker goes off, and you can generally see the pole bending down. What happens at that time, we're pretty much waiting at the particular area. Sometimes the fisherman might be not even right there, but we get to him and get him to man his fighting rod. So what happens with that is you pretty much want to let that king run itself out. You want to man the rod, but you don't want to lock down the drag on him. You just want to let him run with it as far as he wants to go without locking down on him. Let him get tired out. The worst thing you can do is bring in a big king or any size king that's what, as they call, still green, still has a lot going on. He still wants to get loose. He's got a lot of he's moving around a lot of the water. When he's tired out, you got a better shot of getting him landed on the pier. So once you get the king into the pier, close to the pier, a couple things happen. There's got to be somebody that has a gaff with a rope that can gaff the fish. It's about the only way you're going to get, a big fish like that up from the ocean floor, get it up on the pier. So you have to gaff it. And as you're fighting the fish, everybody's kind of watching, because that king can go left and right. You can go towards the beach. It can come back out. There's not a lot you can do to control it except, stay ahead of the fish. If there's a lot of reels and rod and reels out there that are set up, each person that's fishing out there needs to man his particular setup so he can move his rod out of the way, basically by lifting it out of the holder, so the guy can get to the other side of the pier or wherever he needs to get to manage that fish. Once you get them up close to the pier, you bring them in. You start locking obviously down on them at that point, because if you don't, he's going to end up underneath the pier and wrapped around a pylon under the pier, and you have a pretty good shot of losing him at that point. So you want to lock down on the fish and pull him in towards the pier, and the guy with the gaff. Hopefully, you get him close enough to the pier, he can get the gaff in him and pull him up.
And so gaffing, again, I guess, is pretty much a community activity. If I'm new, that's probably something I don't even have to worry about buying, because there's going to be a couple of gaffs out there, and there's going to be plenty of people that like that job. They like that support.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's guys that are experienced at do a better job at it, but it is a community thing. And everybody just chips in and I've had people out there when the Kings lost, they feel worse than the guy that was actually had the fish on, because, they want to do a good job for getting that kingfish, king mackerel up on the pier.
All right. How about some do's and don'ts? I think people are more worried about the don'ts than the do's, but I'm going to ask the do's and the don'ts, because I'm guessing there's some, even with the topic we were just talking about with, fighting a fish and landing a fish. We don't want to be that person. We don't want to go out there and make that mistake. So what are some pitfalls for the newbie to avoid to make sure they get acclimated into that end of the pier culture?
The do's are probably easy, or don'ts are easier to remember than the do's. Basically, you don't want to set your particular rig up too close to your fellow fishermen, because you're going to end up tangled up in his anchor rod or his fighting rod. So you got to be aware of where everybody's fishing. It can get crowded out there. You just got to get it in the right spot and not take somebody else's fishing area. It'll end up in a catastrophe out there. Another don't is don't forget to put your clicker on, because if you don't put your clicker on, that fish could be on and you would never know it. In fact, my first king is exactly what had happened with me. My buddy had reset me. I had lost my bait. I went to the pier house. He hadn't set the clicker on, and we had got distracted. I walked over to my reel, and the reel is completely spooled, like 400 yards gone. The only thing that's holding it is the knot on the spool. And what happened again, the clicker wasn't on, and started putting tension on the reel, and I got a big old king out of it, even after it could have been a total catastrophe. So you got to put your clicker on. Make sure your clicker's on. Do check your bait from time to time. Not all bait is going to live for a long period of time, so you want to make sure the bait is still living, that it's still in the water, because with tide changes, the water level is going to change. So you want to adjust that your fish is actually in the water. Some guys like to fish it right on top of the water. Other ones want to fish it down, 2 to 3 feet in the water. All personal preference again. Those are the things that come to mind. The do's is help everybody else out as much as you can. We share everything out there from the bait we catch. If somebody needs a bait fish, hey, get one from me, because it'll come back to you. And stay out of the way. Gaffs on the pier are very sharp. There's usually a line on the pier where we ask spectators to stay behind that line, because there's a lot going on. And as you've seen a king mackerel before, it's got a lot of teeth. So you don't want one of those in you either. So those are some of the ones that I can think of at this point. Yeah.
That's a good answer. What about time of year? So when am I start fishing for kings? When's my best chance at a king? When do my chances start to subside?
Okay, that depends on the water temperature. When the water temperature gets up there in the 70s degree mark, that's key. So that's probably late May, early June is when you start hitting the pier for kingfishing. This season has been extra long because of the warmer weather. We're still kingfishing, and we'll probably still be kingfishing for at least 2 more weeks. So we'll be into the first part of November this year. Other years, you might get that cold snap earlier, which that pretty much closes down the kings because they've headed south for the winter. So again, June is a good month. August time frame, the water gets a little bit too warm sometimes, so they end up going to deeper water, so it kind of gets slacked off. And then October, November, you're going to get the run of fish going south. So my personal experience with it is that actually I've seen more kings caught in the end of summer, early fall than I've seen at any other time of the year.
And how did you do in your first season kingfishing from Surf City Pier?
Very good as a beginner. I've actually got my third king on this Tuesday. So really was a good season, had a good mentor. Actually took my brother-in-law out for the first time on Tuesday also. He never kingfished. I set him up with a second set of gear, and he caught a king on his first day of fishing, which is crazy, but he did well, and we caught 7 kings on that day on the pier. It was really a good day. And my mentor even caught one that day too. So all 3 of us got a king on Tuesday.
And 3 kings, what's your rough guess of how many days of kingfishing you invested this season?
This season got a little bit late start. You're out there, I probably could average 2 to 3 times a week, depending on the conditions with the weather and everything. I met a guy yesterday that had been fishing for kings for 30 years and never caught a king, but he didn't have the time that I have. He was up, he'd come down to Surf City Pier, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 times a year and stay for a day, and he'd go back. So his odds of catching one were a lot less than mine, obviously. So you have to invest some time, because once you got to get up early, get your bait, and then it's just a waiting game at that point. You could sit out there and not get a strike all day, or you could get out there like we did on Tuesday and get 7 or 8 strikes in a matter of a couple hours.
Mike, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I love our angle talking to a guy who just finished his first season of Pier King mackerel fishing, so everything's sort of fresh in your mind. I'm going to leave it to you. Any final thoughts? You got anything that you'd like to share that I didn't set you up to say?
No, I think as much as I know, my first year, there's a whole lot to it. Again, the final thought would be get a good mentor that's been fishing for kings for a while. Listen to them carefully. You're gonna meet a lot of people that got their own angle on it, and you're gonna learn over time, like I have. What's gonna work for you and what's not gonna work for you. So that's the best thing I can say is just get a good mentor that is you feel like, hey, he's been catching some kings. He knows what's going on. He's doing a good job. That I see him catching kings all the time, and like I said earlier, there's plenty of people out there on that pier that'll help you get set up. It looks complicated. It's a little intimidating at first, but it's not as complicated or as intimidating once you jump in. It's been fairly smooth transition for me, going from just spin casting for Spanish mackerel to kingfishing, and plus I can still Spanish mackerel fish while my king's setup is out there, and so you got a chance of getting a king plus catching your limit of Spanish mackerel during the day too.
Mike, thank you again. This has been great. This has been an easy talk, and again, I love the perspective. I love that you agreed to do this, man. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Billy.
Gary, what a show, man.
Right?
I don't know anything about kingfishing, so I get a bunch of takeaways.
I know, this is what I know. This is my takeaway. If I go kingfishing, I'm calling Mike, and I'm going to pretend to be his brother-in-law, and he's going to set me up.
Yeah, right.
He's going to set me up. I'm just going to give him my cell number. I'm going to go hang out at Surf City Grill and just say, text me if I get a fish.
Yeah. Sounds like a good plan.
Right?
Eat a burger.
Eat a burger, maybe
Hang
some ice
out.
cream. Talk to Vanita. What? No fish yet?
What,
All
no?
right. Check my bait, Mike. Check my bait for me.
What are you doing out there, Mike? Come on, get my fish.
I don't
Dude.
have all summer.
That's or 30 years. Or 30 years. I'm like, dude, forget it. Like 30 years. I'm 34. That's most of my life. This other guy, has been coming down to catch a king and never has.
He says,
And then,
he
you know
says,
what?
hey, honey, I'm going to go kingfishing. Really? Arya, it's been 30 years.
Hey,
Are you still calling it kingfishing?
yeah, Mike's brother-in-law better hope that guy doesn't hear this podcast. He's gonna hunt him down, beat him like a stepchild. Like,
Oh, man.
dude, my best takeaway was give a king fisherman a bluefish and you got a friend for life.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna take that one. He's like a pelican. Just give him your fish.
Yeah.
He'll keep coming back, hanging out with you.
Sage advice.
Oh man! Speaking of keep coming back, guys, make sure you keep coming back by going to our YouTube channel and subscribing. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or Google Music. Oh, and Amazon. We just got on Amazon Podcast, by the way. They got a
All
new
right.
platform. So yeah, I submitted it on there. They're like, yeah, you guys are pretty good. We'll take you. We're Prime, so you can get it anytime, quick, 2 days. No. So, Amazon better write us a check for that promotion. Anyway, speaking of promotion, thank you again, Marine Warehouse, for being just an amazing sponsor of the show and making all this stuff possible for us to do. And really enjoy those guys.
I like to point out, man, they are not just selling, but man, they're part of the fishing community. They're part of the boating community. They take that role very serious, man. They're active.
They're fishing tournaments
Podcast
and
is just
everything,
one of the things that they're involved in. Those guys are very active. They understand that role.
because they got a good marketing director.
They do.
The best.
The best.
Shout out to Lil. Oh man, so much fun, Gary. I think that's it, dude. I don't know if we have anything else.
That's it, man.
Unless
Next
you want
time.
to hear my joke.
No.
All right, next time then.
Next
See
time.
you, man.